Hello, 7th graders, and in tonight's lesson 3-4, we're going to look at solving equations by adding or subtracting decimals. Tonight's objectives include students will be able to solve one-step decimal equations involving addition, and secondly, you will be able to solve one-step decimal equations using subtraction. So let's go ahead and get started. Now for our warm-up tonight, we have some decimals that you either have to add or subtract. Now, I think it would be a good idea to do a couple of these, so I'm going to show you for number 1 first. Remember, the big idea with decimals is to always line up the decimal points when you add or subtract. So I have 2 8/10 plus 7 6/100. All right, I add a 0 to make it to the same, then I add 0 plus 6 is 6, 8 plus 0 is 8. Decimal point is carried down, 7 plus 2 is 9. So I get 9 86/100. I would like you to do numbers 2 and 4. All right, skip 3 for now and just do 2 and 4. And when you're all done, come back and check your answers to see if you're ready for tonight's lesson. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so let's check numbers 3 and 4. So number 3, we had 65/100. And we have 1 8/10. Again, you add a 0, so it's to the same place value. Then you add going down. And you should get 2 45/100. Now number 4, I have 3 7/10 minus 62/100. So I switched 3 7/10 to 3 70/100, and now I subtract. And I get 3 8/100. All right, so let's move on to tonight's lesson. Now first, I have an equation that we learned how to solve in Chapter 2. I have the variable n plus 3 is 41. So we need to go through those steps to solve it. And while I'm doing this problem, you should be working at it too. So do it with me here. So if I wanted to get n by itself, well, on the same side, I have a plus 3. So I'd subtract it. And again, what you do to one side, you do to the other to keep it balanced. And I'm left with n is equal to, well, 41 minus 3 is 38. All right, so that's something we learned last chapter. If you can do those problems, you can do ones involving decimals. All right, so here I have n plus 4 5/10 is equal to negative 9 7/10. All right, same ideas occur. First, find your variable, see what's on the same side in the operation, then do the opposite to both sides. So here, my variable is n, and I take a look. Well, this plus 4 5/10 is on the same side. So to get rid of it, well, they're adding it, so the opposite of adding is subtracting it. We're doing those inverse operations again. Now, if I subtract 4 5/10 from one side, I do it to the other. And I'm left with n, well, that crosses out, is equal to, well, negative 9 7/10 minus 4 5/10. We have to go back to the rules of integers here. And what we have here, well, they're both negative numbers, so you'd end up adding them together, excuse me. So 9 7/10 plus 4 5/10 is 14 2/10, but again, both are negative, so I'd have a negative 14 2/10. All right, and what you can do is actually check your answer. So I could go back to the original and stick in negative 14 2/10, and then I'm adding 4 5/10. Well, again, those signs are different. When you have different signs, you subtract them. So 14 2/10 minus 4 5/10. I get 9 7/10, and again, 14 2/10 was negative and it was bigger. So there we go. I know my equation checks. So my answer here is negative 14 2/10. Now we have this one. We have 6 8/10 plus p is equal to negative 9 7/10. As I'm doing this problem, talk yourself through it as well. So solve it at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with talking out loud so your family hears you, because a lot of the times that helps you understand what you're doing. So first, we identify our variable, which is p. We take a look on what's on the same side? Well, that would be a 6 8/10. Now take a look. There's no plus sign in front of it. It's missing a plus, it's missing a minus. If it doesn't have a sign in front, that automatically means it's positive. It's just 6 8/10. So to get rid of that, I'd have to subtract 6 8/10. And again, that crosses out, and I am left with P is equal to, well, negative 9 7/10 and another negative 6 8/10. Again, I take a look. Both signs are negative. If the signs are the same, add them together. So 9 7/10 plus 6 8/10. And I get 16 5/10, but again, I look, both of them are negative, so my answer is a negative 16 5/10. All right, now I have two problems very much like the ones that we just solved together. I would like you to solve these two, and when you're all done, come back and check your answer to see if you have this one down. So go ahead and pause me now. So let's check A. All right, A says x plus 4 9/10 is 18 8/10. Well, I identify my variable as x. On the same side as a positive 4 9/10, the opposite of adding it is subtracting it. So I do it to both sides. And I am left with x is equal to, and I take a look, I have a positive 18 8/10 and a negative 4 9/10. Well, one's positive, one's negative, so I subtract them. And I get 13 9/10. That is x. All right, for B now, I have 14 73/100 is the same as 24 23/100 plus B. Again, identify your variable, which here is B. And on the same side, I have 24 23/100. Well, again, there's no sign in front. That tells me it's positive. So in order to get rid of a positive, I have to subtract. And I take a look. Well, I'm doing this side first. I have B is equal to 14 73/100 minus 24 23/100. Well, in this one, one's positive, one's negative, so I have to subtract them out. However, this one, you can't do 14 minus 24 because, well, you'd get a negative number, or you can't really take 24 from 14. So in this one, you go back to those rules again. You take the number that's larger, which in this case is 24 23/100, and subtract it. All I'm doing is really flipping it so I can subtract them now. All right, I need to be able to subtract these numbers, so I had to put the larger number on top and the smaller number below it. So I take a look, 3 minus 3 is 0, and I'm going through it. And I get 9 50/100. So I take a look. Well, I know 24 23/100 is a bigger number because that was on top. And, well, that, if I go back up to here, was negative. So my answer is a negative 9 50/100. All right, let's move on to the next piece here. And we have a word problem. And it says, Ping has a board that is 14 5/10 feet long. She saws off a piece that is 8 7/5 feet long. Use a diagram below to find the length of the piece that is left. So here, not only do we have to solve it, but first we have to write out an equation. And this example here is perfect because it tells us all the things we need to know. All right, we know that the whole board here is 14 5/10. All right, that's the complete length. But we also know Ping chose to cut it in half. And one piece was 8 7/5 feet long, and we have to figure out what that missing piece is. So if we write this out, well, we write the pieces first. I know one piece is x feet long, and I know the second one is 8 7/5 feet long. If I add those two pieces together, that'll give me the whole of 14 5/10 feet long. So now I have it written out, so now I have to solve it. So I go through those steps. Well, x is my variable. On the same side is 8 7/5, so I subtract it from both sides, and I'm left with x is equal to, well, I have a positive 14 5/10 and a negative 8 7/5. Well, to subtract it, I need to add a 0, so they're the same place value. Then, well, 14's on top, so I can subtract them. So I have to borrow, and I get, as I go through this, 5 75/100 feet. That is the missing length. And again, it's a word problem, so you do need a label on this one. So that's the first objective. We've solved all those, all those equations by subtracting. Now we're going to use addition to solve all these equations. So here we have solve negative 23 34/100 is the same as Q minus 16 99/100. You go through the same steps. All you're changing is instead of subtracting, you're going to add these pieces together. So I take a look. Q is my variable. On the same side of it is this minus 16 99/100. Well, to get rid of the minus, I add. So you can see how I'm adding each piece. All right, and I am left with, well, Q is equal to, and here I have negative 23 34/100 plus 16 99/100. Here the signs are different. I have that negative and positive. So even though it says using addition to solve equations, we did use that addition here. We added the 16 99/100. But in order to simplify this now, well, the signs are different, so I have to subtract them. So I have 23 34/100 minus 16 99/100. And I get 6 35/100. But again, I go back. My bigger number was 23 34/100, and in the original, that was negative. So my answer is a negative 6 35/100. All right, let's move to the next one. All right, and again, we're going to do A together, and then I'm going to leave you to do B, because this can get a little tricky. All right, we have n minus 5 85/100 is the same as 15 25/100. So again, you find your variable, which is n. On the same side, I have minus 5 85/100, so I'm going to add it to get rid of it. And I am left with n, well, that crosses out, is equal to, and I take a look, well, I have 15 25/100, and I'm adding 5 85/100. Well, this one's nice. The signs are the same. They're both positive. When the signs are the same, add them together. And I get 21 10/100. And again, both are positive, so my answer is positive. All right, now it's your job to do B. I want you to solve negative 10 is the same as C minus 2 6/10. So again, you need to solve for a variable C. Go ahead and do that, and when you're all done, come back and check your answer. Pause me now. All right, let's check B. So on this one, as I said before, my variable is C. So I take a look on the side that has C. And on that side, there's minus 2 6/10. Well, to get rid of that, I add. All right, and I know I'm left with C is equal to, well, here we have a negative 10 and a positive 2 6/10. Well, the signs are different. One's negative, one's positive. I have to subtract them. 10 minus 2 6/10. Well, first I have to write 10 with a decimal point and a 0. Then I solve. And I get 7 4/10. And I take a look, 10's a bigger number, and it was negative. So C is equal to negative 7 4/10. All right, now we have a word problem of it. Again, we're going to go through those same steps. We're going to write out an equation for this, and then we're going to have to solve it. Alejandro wrote a check for $49.98. His new account balance is $169.45. What was his previous balance? Now, when you write out a check, I'm going to give you a hint, because I want you to try to do this first by yourself. All right, when you write out a check, that means you're taking money away from your original balance. So we're really talking about three things here. We talk about the original balance, whatever that may be. We talk about the check that Alejandro wrote out, and now his new balance, which they give us. Use those three pieces of information to try to write down the equation that goes with this one. And when you're all done, come back and check it. All right, and then I'm going to allow you to solve it. So go ahead and pause me now. All right, so let's check out what you got. Well, we know he had some money in his bank, but they don't tell us how much he had to begin with. So I'm going to write X. That was his original balance. And I know Alejandro decided to write out a check for $49.98. So he lost that money. He doesn't have that much anymore. So when you take out the original, or that $49.98 from the original, we know that he still had $169.45. All right, so now we have our equation set up. Now you have to solve it. You can do this at the same time, and I'm going to solve it as well. My variable is X. On the same side is that minus $49 and change, so I'm going to add it. And when I do that, I get X is equal to, well, I take a look. Both are positive. When the signs are the same, I get to add them together. So I'm going to just add. And I get $219.43. And again, you can check your answer if you want to. If I go back to the original, $219.43. Well, if I subtract that $49.98 from it, I should get $169.45. If I don't, then I know I did something wrong. And it's always nice to be able to know right away if you got it right or wrong. I get $169.45. There we go. It worked out. I know my answer is correct. All right, that brings us to the end of the lesson for tonight. I will see you in class tomorrow. Have a wonderful night.